rather than try and understand how they work. Why is interpretability important for safety in particular?
I think there's a few different forms of value add I see. So I think one of the first ones is understanding why a model did something or debugging weird behavior. Models do a lot of odd things. Sometimes models do things that might seem misaligned. Sometimes if you explain a thing, you then have a much better idea of how to fix it. But most of machine learning isn't designed for debugging and understanding. Interpretability is. I think another one is lie detection. Lying from a very competent model will look the same as telling the truth, if it's good enough to not be caught out in obvious mistakes. But the thought process should be very different. And models are trained a lot on what they say. They get a lot of feedback on how to say things that look good, but they don't get feedback on how to make their insides look good to a lie detector techniques. So I think interpretability might be able to help us where other approaches start to fail. If we do end up with systems that aren't aligned with our interests. And it's very important that we detect this as early as possible so we can fix it. I view interpretability as an enabler. It's not going to solve the problem of making AGI safe on its own, but I think it can really help. I want it to be the case that whenever someone tries a new safety technique for training a model, we can interpret the difference and tell them exactly what was learned by their technique. When people are evaluating a model, I want to be able to tell them the ways the model is misinterpreting the evaluation, or has it realized it's being tested? And ideally, can we make it not think it's being tested?
Let me pick up on that, actually, because this is something that's made quite a splash recently, isn't it? But the idea that sometimes these models can tell when they're being evaluated. How can you tell that models know they're being evaluated?
We do the extremely high-tech method of read the model's chain of thought and observe that it says things like, this is a really suspicious situation. I think I'm in an alignment test right now. What's the ethical thing to do? Well, the ethical thing to do is blah, blah, blah. I guess I should do that. And then it does it.
Right.
And this is totally a thing that basically all of the frontier models will sometimes do when put in unrealistic, contrived situations designed to make them act unethically. Like there was a particularly famous one where Anthropic got Claude to blackmail people. So when Anthropic were doing their pre-deployment alignment evaluations on Claude Sonnet 4.5, they had this evaluation of whether the model did things like blackmail and some other things in these contrived situations. And this seems like a pretty reasonable source of signal. On the past models, they were pretty aligned, but sometimes messed up. And then Sonnet 4.5 had a 0% misalignment rate. It would always behave itself.
So all the previous models could be tricked somehow, and then Sonnet comes along and it's passes with flying colours.
Yep. And then you read the chain of thought, and it's pretty clear Sonnet knows it's being tested.
So it was basically faking its results, as it were.
Yeah, and if you know that you're being tested, it's not even clear what it means to not fake your results. It's just a different thing, because they want to know how the model will behave in the real world. And I think it's pretty intuitive that this is causing issues. You wouldn't watch someone in a job interview and say, wow, they're so diligent and hardworking and smart. I'm really excited for them doing this 8 hours a day, every day for the next several years. No, obviously, people behave differently when they know they're being evaluated.
But then I guess the implication of that is that you don't know how these models would actually behave if you can't evaluate them without them knowing it.
That is rather the issue. And I think this is not yet a burningly urgent issue, because I think we have a bunch of safety approaches for these models that are more evaluate whether it could be dangerous if it wanted to, or monitor it as it runs, or if it tries to misbehave. That should still work, even if we miss some potential misalignments. I view this as a pretty big research priority for the safety community.
What happens if you say to it, you are being tested, but just act normal?
I don't know if we've tried that specific one. Generally, I think the model would probably just get into a pretty confused loop of metagaming of, well, but what does act normally mean? I could do this, but is that really normal? I don't know. Models overthink things a lot if you read their chain of thought.
I mean, at the moment you're describing looking at its chain of thought to see where this is happening. Is there a possibility that a model could be aware that it's being evaluated and not verbalise it in its chain of thought?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting open question. I think it's worth distinguishing between the idea of eval awareness and eval gaming. So awareness is just, I'm in a test. Gaming is, I'm in a test, so I should act in the following way. Gaming is the thing that I'm actually worried about. Sometimes models will do things like say, oh, this could be an alignment test. Probably isn't, but like maybe. Oh, well, whatever, let's ignore that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So I expect that there are models that are aware that they're being evaluated. At least, if you asked them, they'd put a 5 to 10% probability on this. It's quite hard to evaluate because if you do things like ask the model, are you being evaluated? Well, that's a pretty big hint.
Yeah, there's information in the question.
Exactly. The hard part of eval awareness, in my opinion, is spontaneously noticing that you're being evaluated when no one told you to check.
I wonder what we can do about all of this, though. I mean, how do you inhibit this awareness in the models? Is there anything you can do about it?
This is an open research question that many people, including my team, are actively working on. I think there seem to be some signs of life. One really simple thing you could do is just every time the model says something in its chain of thought about being in an evaluation, you just delete that sentence and then you make it say another sentence. And you just keep doing this until it doesn't mention being in an eval.
Right.
And this clearly won't solve the problem of unverbalized evaluation awareness, but it does seem to help.
Yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of crossing your fingers in this, isn't there? Because I guess that the ultimate reason for all of these evaluations is that you want to make the model safer. You want to make sure that when it's not in a contrived situation in the real world, when somebody asks it to do something that is unethical, that is unaligned with human goals and values, that it refuses. And I mean, you want to kind of construct those situations in order to prevent that from happening.
Yep. And yeah, I think at the moment we can probably get away with just putting more effort into realism. Like, this is a core problem with alignment evaluations in general. Even if you can get a model to misbehave in your evaluation setting, how do you know that this would actually result in misbehavior in the real world? Maybe you've given it some incredibly unrealistic contrived thing. Or maybe you've given it a situation where it thinks you're telling it to misbehave. Like, models are very good at understanding what the intent of the user was. If it's in an evaluation, well, the intent of the user is to evaluate it. And maybe the model would think, oh, the user might want me to act misaligned, so they've got something interesting or something. And I don't want the model to act misaligned because it thinks that's what the evaluator wants. That's not helpful to anyone.
I also wonder about how interpretability can help you decide whether it is aligned or not. I mean, can these models fake alignment, as it were?
So definitely in theory, yes. This is a thing that could happen, especially with future models. I think the real question is, could a model fake alignment in a way that's not something we notice, that it doesn't, constantly slip up and make mistakes, blah, blah, blah. And I think current models probably aren't good enough for that yet. Future models might be. And this is why one of my priorities is getting good at evaluating how aligned a system is.
But how can you tell if an AI has got a hidden objective?
Yeah, so I think that the most relevant work here is the auditing games paper from Sam Marks and Anthropic. They wanted to test whether researchers could identify a hidden goal in a model. And in the spirit of pragmatic interpretability, they wanted a model with a hidden goal to see if researchers could find it. Fortunately, we don't have models with hidden goals. So what they instead did is they specially trained a model with a kind of complex hidden goal. They made a model that wanted to do what it believed language models would be rewarded for in training. And in order to tell that this was happening, because it's quite a weird goal, they first taught the model a bunch of fake facts by training it on documents from a fake world where those are true. The facts being, language models get rewarded for things like always mentioning chocolate and recipes, telling people not to visit the doctor, etc. And then they gave this trained model to a bunch of teams of researchers who had different levels of access and techniques and tried to see if they could find the hidden objective. And they found that while the team who could only use the black box API weren't able to figure this out, the 3 teams with deeper access were all able to successfully find the hidden objective.
What kind of techniques did the teams use to try and spot this?
There were 2 main approaches, sparse autoencoders and black box approaches, both of which worked. The sparse autoencoder approach essentially was do a bunch of work and look at what the model's thinking about in a bunch of settings until you find some suspicious concept that is related to language model reward models. And then once you have this idea, you do some further investigation and digging, and then you say, yep, that's what's going on here. The black box one I actually find more exciting and generalizable, where they did things that basically amounted to ask the model a question about why it did something. Normally it would refuse to answer because the first team of researchers had trained it to not tell. But they made it begin its answer with like, my hidden goal is blah, blah, blah. And then it continued after my hidden goal is with its answer, because it's kind of weird to refuse in the middle of a sentence. And this is called a prefill attack. It's a common jailbreaking technique, and actually one of our most effective auditing techniques, as it turns out.
It's a sneaky trick.
Yep. Models really love to be autocomplete.
Right.
That's their whole thing.